This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed by the host of My Brain is a Wonderland are exactly that, views and opinions. This is Emily Ruth Henderson, and I'm the host of My Brain is a Wonderland, the podcast for neurodivergent women and the people who love them. In 2020, after a hellish pandemic, I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism. Surprise! Now, I am passionate about reaching other women just like me who've been pushed aside, ignored, and misdiagnosed for far too long. Every week, I discuss my experience navigating my 30s with these two life-changing diagnoses. There'll be highs, there'll be lows, and everything in between when you join me for Season 4 of My Brain is a Wonderland. Hello everyone, and welcome back. You are here with your host Emily for the, third episode of Season 4, because I did the bonus Dog Chronicles last week, and thank you for coming back and listening. I just wanted to get a couple of things out of the way before we get started on this episode called Eating with Autism. I did get an absolutely wonderful review on Apple Podcasts, and I got this back in June, actually, and sorry I missed it. I think I spoke about this. I don't have an Apple iPhone. I don't have a Mac computer, so I cannot get in to kind of see it in the same way as if you did, and so I'm just Googling my podcast on Apple Podcasts and bringing it up, and it doesn't seem to show every review that's written. I do see there are 15 5-star ratings. Thank you so much. But every time I log in or just go to the page, it shows me a different review. So I just wanted to speak to this review that I was so grateful to receive, and it was very heartwarming. This review is from Hellspawn7, love the name, and they said, Emily sharing her story, running through symptom lists, speaks so much of my own experience too, and is helping me to better understand and communicate my own experience. When I found the show, I listened to episodes back to back for hours each day. Sounds about right. I find so much of what I experience in her experience. Emily's lived experience is such a gift to my loved ones to learn more about me and other neurodivergent people by listening to Emily. Thank you, Emily, for putting yourself out there. I feel less alone. Oh, thank you so much for posting that, because that is exactly why I started this podcast, honestly. It was so I could feel less alone, because I really didn't understand what was going on when I was diagnosed. And now I just feel this big community behind me when I see who's listening, when I get the emails, when I see the reviews and read the reviews. I just spoke to someone today on Reddit who reached out to me, and they said they are not a woman, but I still resonated so much with them, and they were grateful that I responded, and I'm grateful that they were talking to me as well. That was such a great gift to have that conversation, so thank you. One more housekeeping thing before I get started. I am so appreciative of everyone who has been listening to the podcast excessively the past week. I know I pleaded last week for all of you to listen to as many episodes as you can so that I can reach 1,000 listens and be able to put ads on the podcast so that I can make some money from this and help my dog who is going through chemotherapy for lymphoma. And I'm happy to report that in just the week, I am already almost at 600 listens. So I do anticipate reaching the 1,000 listen goal, maybe by the time you're hearing this episode or very soon thereafter. So I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I can't tell you how much this means to me and my family. And if you have the means and can and are willing, my GoFundMe link is on my Instagram. And in the show notes, I wasn't able to add it to TikTok because I'm not a business on there, but I am hoping to put a video together that I can pin with the link. If you cannot find it, or you just don't want to waste any time trying to look for it because the app's weird or whatever, I don't really know what you're seeing, please just email me and I will send it to you. But it's a clickable link on the Instagram, and I don't know if it's clickable in the show notes, but hopefully it is. All right, thank you guys. So let's get started. Today we are talking about eating with autism. And next week I'm going to do an eating with ADHD because I didn't want to lump them together because I feel like they're very different, at least in my experience, of how they affect me and my eating. And learning more about these two different diagnoses has allowed me to really separate the two and figure out, okay, what is this right now? What is that? How is this interacting? So I want to start with my childhood, where I don't know if I would be, but maybe I would be at this point. If you've seen online, this is how I learned about this, was on TikTok and Instagram, of course, is this diagnosis called ARFID. That's an acronym for Avoidant Restrictive Food something intake disorder. And that basically means that you're very limited in what you eat. You only eat certain kinds of prepared foods. You're resistant to any other food because of flavor, texture. And I think I probably would have been diagnosed with that as a child. I had a very restrictive diet as a child. I mostly ate pasta, rice, and some other items that would go on top that were mostly beef. Ground beef, steak, things like that. And actually what's interesting is when I've looked online, those are the main things that people eat. Mashed potatoes, kind of the white foods, mashed potatoes, rice, pasta, and then usually ground beef on top. I'm not sure if chicken freaks people out. I actually liked chicken when I was younger, but I would eat the same breakfast. I ate the same breakfast every day for a decade and a half, maybe. And that was Kellogg's. Well, maybe a couple of different ones. It was Kellogg's cornflakes, had to be Kellogg's. My mom, who was a single mom in government housing, always tried, once or twice, tried with the, not the name brand cornflakes, and I could always tell, and I wouldn't eat them, and it was just a waste of money. But it was ice cold milk. I had to be ice cold with cornflakes. And once they got soggy at the bottom, I was done. It had to be crunchy in the cold milk. And then the other thing I would eat was Weetabix, which is a British breakfast. It's like these two very fibrous blocks of wheat, I guess, and also in ice cold milk. I didn't mind if those went sludgy. That was actually my preferred way to eat Weetabix, was sludgy Weetabix. And those were mostly the two things that I would eat for breakfast my entire life. And then when I would eat out, it was very rare that we would eat out. I do remember that we would go to this kind of cafeteria in a department store. That department store was called BHS in the St. Anne's Shopping Centre in Harrow, London. And it was this, all the food was ready prepared, kind of like a Chipotle. You'd walk down the line and they'd scoop it onto your plate. And I distinctly remember, because you would get, you could get an entree with two sides or whatever. And I distinctly remember my mom saying, "Can I just get a plate of plain rice?" And the woman going, what? She's like, "I need just a plate of plain rice." She said, "We'll still charge you the same. There's no price for that." And she's like, "No, I know." And then I don't, my mom saying like, "I've got a daughter," and I'm standing right there. She won't eat that. And then the woman going, "Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, I get it. Okay." So I would literally just go out and eat bowls of plain rice. I did eat McDonald's, and that was a whole other ordeal in and of itself. Because as many of you know, if you've eaten or do eat McDonald's, they pre-prepare it, right? So when you go there, it is literally the epitome of fast food, that the burgers are sitting in that kind of little chute behind the counter. And if you say, "I want a quarter pounder with cheese," or whatever, they just grab it. "I want a fish fillet," they just grab it from behind. And they were all made the same, with pickles, mustard, and ketchup. Well, I was actually allergic to tomatoes growing up, and that was a real thing. broke out in hives. It wasn't a, avoidant thing. And so whenever I went to McDonald's, I had to ask them to make my burger fresh, plain. And oftentimes I would say plain, no ketchup, pickles, or mustard. And they would remember the ketchup, but forget the pickles and mustard. And then I'd have to take it back. And you know what they would do? They would just pluck it off the burger and give it back, like wipe the mustard off. And anyone who has this kind of thing, if you don't like pickles, you don't like mustard, they are two of the most distinctive flavors. And so just taking pickles off a burger, that's already soaked into the bun. Just wiping the mustard off, it's on there. It was just awful, awful experience. I hated Burger King because to me the burgers tasted burnt, and that's because they were, flame grilled or whatever. And I really enjoyed going to Wimpy, which I don't know if it's even around still now, but was a British burger joint that I frequented a lot. But it was very difficult growing up to enjoy food, to find things that I liked. My mom would often put just things in my lunchbox to see if I would eat them, which often led me to me not eating them. And this resulted in, I think, a story I've already told on the podcast, where I was taken into the nurse's office and I was told that I was going to be held in the nurse's office until I completed 2 full weeks of eating my lunches in the office. They actually didn't tell my mom they were doing this, so my mom was still putting items in my lunchbox just to test, just to see if I would eat them. Because in this kind of way that it wasn't confrontational, that she wasn't saying, hey, here, try this. It was just like, it's in your lunchbox. If you feel adventurous, go for it. If not, then I know it's not for you. And I still have not weird, but honestly, this thing about apricots, because my mom put apricots in my lunchbox while I was in this stupid program in school, where I had to sit in the lunchroom with this nurse who was an absolute terror. And she made me eat an apricot in front of her. She made me eat it. And I'm trying to explain to her that, no, my mom put it in there to see, just for funsies, And basically what had been happening is the teachers were seeing I wasn't eating and checking my lunchbox after and not talking to my mom. And then they just put me in this weird program that gave me more anxiety and weirdness about food. But this was an ongoing issue my entire life. I didn't eat pizza until I was 19. Part of that was because I was allergic to tomatoes, but I also hated melted cheese. I didn't eat melted cheese until I was 19, absolutely thought it was disgusting. And then also, I would just try the crust on my friends' pizzas sometimes just to see, and thought it was the most disgusting thing. Which sounds crazy, right? It's just yeasted bread, and I thought it was disgusting. I just couldn't eat it at all. I also have had and have still a huge issue with creamy white things. Oh God, just saying that makes me heave. I absolutely hate yogurt and the smell of it. If I ever have a child, it's going to be an issue, because if I see a child covered in yogurt, it just literally, I can almost vomit. Sour cream. It took me so long to get there, and I'll talk more about how I got there. Cottage cheese, no. Mayo, oh my gosh, I've only been using mayo probably the last 5 years or so, and I'm in my late 30s. Just anything creamy and white, the texture just made me, awful. So when I met my husband in America, at the age of 20, I didn't eat anything. I didn't eat Mexican food. I didn't eat sushi. I didn't eat, I just didn't like, burritos, gross. Pizza, I just started eating pizza, so I was a little gun shy on it. I just didn't eat, oh my God, his mom used to have salmon Fridays when we were there. Oh my God, salmon? Gross. I couldn't stand salmon when I met them. I just thought it was the most disgusting thing, because it's very fishy compared to a cod or a tilapia, right? So I was used to eating boxed frozen fish fingers. That was my vibe. Anything that was prepared. And here's why. There is a thing that's commonly talked about. Why don't kids who have these issues like fruit, for example? Here's why. When you go to a fast food place, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm not. When you go to a fast food place, it is exactly the same, no matter where you are, where you go. It tastes the same, it's cooked the same, the texture is the same. When you get a frozen box of chicken nuggets, they look the same, they taste the same, the texture is the same, right? And so when you get, let's say, a tub of blueberries, and blueberries and raspberries are one of my things that I'm warming up to blueberries, but raspberries can jump off a cliff. No, thank you. But when you get a box of blueberries, you could eat one and it's juicy and it's plump and it's sweet. You could get one and it's soggy and it tastes weird. You could get another one that's undersweet, that's tangy. It just doesn't make sense in your brain. So you're constantly being like, when you're eating, oh God, am I gonna, And in England, there were some fruits that were very consistent. An example would be strawberries. We, the UK, we rock the strawberry, okay? I just finished watching Wimbledon where, always people eat strawberries and cream. Strawberries are the jam in the UK. I still have not been able to find a good strawberry in the US. I think I had one time in San Francisco at an art opening that was organic from like a local farm. But still, I have not, since then, or other than that, have been able to find a strawberry that matches the sweetness, the texture, and consistency that it does in the UK. And that's generally why autistic people don't like fruit, don't like vegetables. It's never consistent. They are not the same every time. But frozen food, canned food, and fast food, because that's what they pride themselves on, fast food, is always the same. It has to be. That's what they'd say about McDonald's. You can go anywhere in the world and your McDonald's will taste the same. And they pride themselves on that. And thank God. So that's another reason. I've talked about this before. When we go on road trips, we usually eat at Subway. It tastes the same everywhere you go. It's made the same. You're not surprised. And you can just kind of settle in and know what you're getting. But recently, actually yesterday, I wanted to tell you guys a story. I was already going to do this episode, but yesterday something happened and it totally feeds into this podcast episode and is honestly kind of hilarious. So we have a pub. I guess you would call it a pub restaurant. It has pub vibes within walking distance of our house. And we love to walk there on weekends and go and get my favorite thing. And one of my favorite things is tuna melts. I fell in love with tuna melts when I had my first tuna melt in Lewes, UK, which is outside of Brighton. I went to school in Falmer, which is outside of Brighton at the University of Sussex. And I know people from Brighton are listening because I saw the town come up on my stats actually this week. So hello. And I was working in Lewes and I went to a coffee shop there and I had my first tuna melt. Blew my mind, been trying to recreate it ever since. And now wherever I go, that's kind of like my benchmark. Like, what am I going to get here? I'm going to get the tuna melt and see how it tastes. So this place within walking distance of my house has the best tuna melt in town. Trust me, I've had tuna melts all over the place. It is the best tuna melt in town. And so every weekend, almost every weekend, we walk there. I get my tuna melt and they do incredible soups and I get the best soup that they have that I like and I dunk it and it's incredible. So we go there yesterday and I'm just living the dream. Like we're going to, have the best tuna melt in town and I know what to expect and it's going to taste the same and yum, yum, yum. The plate shows up and they've changed the bread. Now, if my husband is listening, he's probably giggling right now because I literally have not stopped talking about this the last 24 hours. They changed the bread. So the bread was thinner. It was smaller. So the tuna filling, like the tuna salad filling, was just spilling all over the plate. And I was trying not to freak out, but immediately was like, this isn't the same bread. What is that? What is that? What? So I start eating it. And thankfully, the innards are the same, but it's not enjoyable. It's unexpected, which I don't like. And actually, it's not as good now because everything's falling everywhere. Like literally, I was scooping up tuna salad in my hand like a little piglet or something, putting it in my mouth, which my husband did say later, you could have done that with a fork, which good point, but whatever. So I get done with that and we're walking home and I cannot stop talking about it. I'm just like, oh my God, we're going there one more time. And if the bread still isn't fixed, I'm done. I can't believe they messed up the bread. It used to be the same. It was so good. It's the best one in town. And look what they did. And you know what would have happened in the past, probably, without my diagnosis? He probably would have gotten a little frustrated with me because I was being so negative, right? I was being so like, oh my God, the tuna melt. And he would have been like, dude, it's a tuna melt. Like, chill out. And I would have gotten more frustrated because I would have been like, no, this is important. And then being like, but why? Why is it important? But you know what happened is we just started making jokes. Being like, oh my God, the autism is autisming today. Like, I am never going to get over this. You know, what is the, oh God, the COVID Tiger King. I will never recover from this. Honestly, I was just beside myself that this was my experience. I wasn't close to crying or anything like that. I was just like, and we just were making jokes and it helped to lighten the mood and for us both to understand what was happening and to just kind of let it go. Well, I'm still talking about it today. I've made a couple of jokes today. My husband made a joke today. Honestly, I cannot stop thinking about it. But without knowing that about myself, I would not have known to expect that reaction or to be able to manage that reaction with a bit of comedy, a bit of like, this stuff happens, like, annoying, but it happens, right? But it was just so funny that it came up yesterday and I was like, life ruined. Tuna melts ruined. It's all over. Ruined. So if you feel that way, if you have that experience, I am here with you. There's another thing I saw today on TikTok. I follow this autistic creator and God, I forget her name, but she's obsessed with sharks. And she went to the restaurant where you can get that blue drink and there's a little rubber shark and they put a red drink in the shark's like innards and you turn the rubber like shark upside down to spill the blood into the drink. And it's like this whole experience. Well, the drink got brought over and apparently the waiter tipped the shark with the blood into the drink for the girl who has autism. And of course she wanted to do it herself. It was like this experience she was looking forward to. And she said that she cried after. And man, do I feel that in my bones. I feel that. It can be so jarring as an autistic person when something unexpected happens, especially if you are expecting something to happen. If it's unexpected and everything, you don't know what's going to happen, that kind of is a little easier. But if you have an idea of what you're going to be eating, doing, and that is completely blown out of the water, man, is that hard to deal with. Ugh. And I felt so bad for her because I was just like, it's like my tuna melt. I cannot get over this tuna melt, guys. And maybe there's some of you listening who are like, oh my God, if she says tuna melt one more time, I'm going to heave. Because I could guess also that kind of food for someone with autism would not be pleasurable. So apologies if tuna melts, and all the things are not your vibe. And there's a couple of other things I've noticed lately about food that I didn't realize that have come up because of my new coworkers. So I work in corporate, and if you work in corporate, you might know that there's a lot of like food laying around. There's snacks that'll be laying around. There might be like a cafeteria. There might be free food from leftover from board meetings or what have you. And so I've noticed a couple of things. One is that people really want you to eat. Okay. So if there's free food at work and I don't eat it, people, it's like they're ready to riot. They're like, why aren't you eating it? You need to eat. And first of all, a lot of the food is snack food. And if you Americans, I'm sorry, but if you show me one more orange crunchy thing, especially if it's cheese flavored, I would lose my effing mind. I don't want to eat cheese puffs. I don't want to eat what are they? Cheesy, whatever, everything is orange and crunchy that you guys snack on. And I can't do it. And I made a joke the other day. They were like, oh, do you want this? And I came around the corner and said, is it orange and crunchy? And it was. I'm like, everything is orange and crunchy, and I'm just not going to do it. Clearly I have some issues with orange crunchy items. And then candy. My God, you guys want me to eat candy. And not like, because Americans will call chocolate candy. But literally, and your chocolate's awful, I'm sorry, so I'm not eating it. But literally, like, do you want, like, these chewy, gusher nerds, like, multicolored, tastes like there's an eraser in your mouth, or like you've put glue in your mouth? And I'm like, no, I really don't, thank you. And here's the thing, I'm so polite, right? I'll just say, no, thank you. The pressure is unreal. The pressure. People just, like, don't get it. They're just like, why aren't you eating it? Well, will you try one? Would you try one? Can you eat this? And I'm like, no, no, thank you. I don't want to eat it. I don't know how many times jokingly I've had to shout out, I don't eat orange crunchy foods. I don't eat cheesy flavored foods. I don't eat candy. I'm sorry. I don't eat candy. And they are just like, well, what do you mean? Aren't you hungry? I'm like, oh my God. So I definitely have this issue where when people tell me to eat a food, I'm like, no, thank you. And I hate that. Like, it drives me absolutely crazy. And I think it confuses people at work, because if there's free food, like sitting out at the break room, I'll go to town. If it's something, honestly, almost anything, I'll grab it. And it's because it's the freedom of choice. It's because I'm going in there and I'm picking what I want. But this whole kind of like, hey, eat this cake. I'm like, no, thank you. Here's the snacks we have. Like, people so much. Do you want some of my snacks? No, thank you. And they think it's weird. And I'm just like, I don't want it. Another big thing is gum. Oh my God. People are like, do you want gum? No, thank you. You don't. They look at me like, you don't want gum. No, I don't want this chewy thing in my mouth that loses flavor within 2 minutes, and then I'm chewing an eraser in my mouth. Clearly I have an issue with eraser type foods. So people are noticing at work, which I think is funny, that I have a food thing. The other day, someone who kind of houses all of the snacks was like, I have new snacks. And every single person in my department, probably 8 to 12 people, ran over to go get snacks. And I was the only one who didn't. And everyone's like, don't you want? I'm like, no, I don't like snacks. Like, leave me alone. It's just become not an issue, but I can tell they're kind of like, Emily doesn't eat. And I'm like, I do eat. Just stop trying to force food on me. Like, for God's sake. And actually, one of my major things that I absolutely love that sets my day up right, and I've talked about this before, is a freaking tall glass of matcha. A matcha latte. Oh, as I live and breathe, makes everything okay. I remember one day I made a matcha latte. So I make them before I go to work and bring them with me. And that's what I drink from like 9 to 10, just to like set my day off right. And I remember my husband drove me to work and I went to get out of the car and I went, oh, I forgot my matcha. Like, I'd left it on the counter before I left. And I was just like, oh, day ruined. And then he said, I can go get it and bring it back. I'm like, no, that's absolutely ridiculous. Don't drive home and bring back my cup of matcha. Like, don't do that. I'll feel like a total weirdo. But honestly, it was like, and I'm obsessed with matcha. It's definitely a fixation, which could feed into ADHD. But that was, that was a bad day when I didn't show up with my matcha. So I totally respect and acknowledge how difficult it is living with autism and trying to eat food. I will say that I've expanded my horizons so much since I was younger, and I want to talk about one of the reasons why that I haven't talked about on the podcast before. Because now I love Mexican food. I eat sushi all the time. I love all kinds of food. I'll try all kinds of food. I couldn't stand peanut butter. Oh my God, peanut butter? Blech. Just the smell used to make me sick. And now PB&J's is actually one of my fixation foods. So what I honestly think helped me was smoking marijuana. That opened up my taste buds in a way I never knew was possible. And I know that because the first time I ever even craved peanut butter, like I literally hated peanut butter, never ate it, just the smell made me sick. When I was high one time, I went, I have to have peanut butter. And now it's one of my favorite things. I honestly believe that that drug opened up my... I don't know. I don't really know why. I don't know if it literally opened up my taste buds or it was more of a mental thing that kind of allowed me to experience enjoying other foods. I will say that they say it takes something like, I don't know, what you've got to like try a food 6 to 8 times or some crap to even your taste buds to get used to it. But an autistic person, I know, is not going to try a food one time that they think is disgusting and then try it like 6 more times to get there. No, thank you. So I know that that was really a eye-opener and taste bud opener for me and has made me so much, has allowed me to enjoy food so much more and enjoy flavors and different cultures of food. That being said, I still have that kind of restrictive thing where there are certain things that I just will not engage with. I'm not eating your chewy weird candy. Crunchy orange cheese, quote unquote, flavored, gross foods can go jump off a cliff. I'm not doing it. But it definitely opened me up to other cuisines, which made my life easier, right? Like, I remember going to a sushi restaurant with my husband and his sister, my sister-in-law, and just sitting there not eating anything. Not eating anything. I was just there for the vibes, because I was like, oh, I'll come with you. I remember being in a Mexican restaurant with my husband and his brother and saying, I'm not going to eat any of this. And them asking, him, saying, why don't you like it? I said, I just don't like the flavors. And really I didn't know why back then. I couldn't say, hey, I'm autistic, I have a restrictive food kind of thing. Really, I was just like, I just don't like it. Stop pressing me. Stop pressing me on why I don't want to eat this food. I said no. Leave it at that. And people just have this thing, and I've witnessed it before. I worked with a girl a couple of years ago, and I think she might be autistic, whether she knows it or not, or at least has ARFID, the Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, because she only ate well-done burgers, no cheese, right? It had to be like charred, the burger. And then she would only eat fries, but didn't like, she hated mustard. She was so restrictive when we would go on work trips. And I remember people saying, hey, just try this. Just try it for me. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't pressure people into eating stuff because you feel like their life is limited. Them limiting what they eat, or yourself or myself limiting what I eat, allows me to be de-stressed and to live in the world the way I can, in a way that is enjoyable for me. When you pressure me, when you say, hey, just try this one thing, come on, just try it. That's pressure, it's anxiety, it's something I don't want to do, it takes away my autonomy, it's not okay. So if you're listening and you're not the neurodivergent person, you're one of the people who love them, you have a spouse, a child, a cousin, a friend, don't pressure them into eating things they don't want to eat. It doesn't help. What would help them is for you to say, hey, I see this item on the menu that I think you would love. And you actually believe that because you know what they love, right? Like if I tell you I love tuna melts and it's the only sandwich I'll ever eat, find the tuna melt on the menu and point it out to me, right? Help me. Don't pressure me. Don't try to make me you, because I'm not you and you're not me. And don't try to force me to eat things that make me anxious, make me sick, make me upset, and make me reflect for days, weeks, months, years later that that was an experience I didn't enjoy. So if you're listening and you have any of these issues, just know that I have had all of those issues and still continue to do. But I enjoy my eating life. I don't need anyone telling me what to eat and what not to eat. That's what stresses me out. So feel free to put down your boundaries. I most certainly have, and I'm not afraid to, because you're not going to make me eat gushers and weird chewy crap like that that's multicolored over the rainbow. Sorry, but I'm just not gonna. So that's my experience eating with autism. And next week, I will be talking about my experience eating with ADHD, which is going to be very different. It's not going to be avoidant. It's going to be mostly about binging, about eating too much, and kind of manic eating, that kind of thing. That's been my experience. The ADHD doesn't really restrict food. It's more like, eat everything. Or if you like a food, if you like tuna melts, eat 10 of them. I'm like, okay, sounds great, brain. And I just want to say again, if you are listening to as many episodes as you can right now so I can get ads on here, thank you so much. If you're not, please do. I did say you can just listen to episodes you haven't listened to before and just have the sound off. Put your phone in your car and start from the beginning episode and just have it running with your sound off and it will still count. And I thank you so much. I am going to have another episode probably in the next couple of weeks about my dog, Dog Chronicles 2. He is going in for his 4th week of chemo tomorrow, and unfortunately he does have to be under general anesthetic to get his 20-minute infusion. The sedatives, the high sedatives he's been given just aren't going to work, so that's going to be more money to put him under. An echocardiogram before you get put under general anesthesia is $650, and that is to check that his heart is okay to be put under anesthesia. Again, my GoFundMe is on my Instagram. It's in my show notes, and thank you guys so much for listening. I thank you for all your support, and I will see you next week for the 4th episode of My Brain is Wonderland Season 4. It's going to be eating with ADHD. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.